Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a pretty fascinating journey, I think, into the mind of René Descartes.
Right, the person so many people call the founder of modern philosophy.
Exactly. And we're focusing on the work that really set the stage for everything he did later,
Mm.
the Discourse on Method.
Mm.
We're going to be digging into sources from his early, more scientist period, you could say. So roughly 1618 to 1637.
Right, this is before he becomes the full-on metaphysician that everyone studies in philosophy class.
And our mission really is to get at why he felt he had to just invent a new system from scratch, how he built this simple but really powerful method that he thought could guarantee truth in a world that was just, drowning in confusion.
Well, and what's so striking right from the start is just how dissatisfied he was.
You'd think he'd be confident. He went to one of the best schools in Europe, the Collège Royal de la Flèche.
Exactly. But Descartes himself said that all his education did was reveal his own ignorance. He felt like he was, and this is his phrase, surrounded by doubt and error.
So he wasn't just trying to find a few new facts. This
Yeah.
was something much bigger.
Oh, absolutely. He was rejecting the whole scholarly game of just solving little technical problems. He wanted to build a single, unified structure for all knowledge.
Right. And if you look at the full, very long title of the book,
Which nobody ever does.
no, but it includes essays on optics and meteorology. But he makes it clear that the six-part discourse on method is the real engine behind it all. The method was the key.
The method was everything.
So, okay, how does this restlessness start to show up in his actual life? What was he doing that prepared him to become, the ultimate doubter?
Well, you see it pretty early. He was born wealthy in 1596, studied law, but then he joins the military.
Right, from 1618 to 1621.
And that's critical because it gets him traveling all across Germany, Italy, Holland. He deliberately set out to read what he called the great book of the world.
And what did he find in that book?
Extreme variation. He saw that customs, opinions, laws, they were completely different from one place to the next.
Which is a powerful lesson, isn't it? The thing you think is absolute truth back home is just a local habit somewhere else.
Precisely. And that realization that he shouldn't believe anything just because of example and habit, that became the absolute foundation for his entire system. The world trip had to happen before the mind trip could.
But he wasn't totally alone in this. The sources mention a really important friendship with Isaac Beeckman.
Yes, a doctor who was into math and physics. Descartes wrote his first ever treatise for him.
And there's that letter from 1619, which I love, where he's not just talking about ideas, he's asking about Beeckman's health, his actual well-being. It shows a human side to the great rationalist.
It does. But intellectually, he was moving so fast. He found the old scholastic philosophy to be fundamentally contrary to what he was looking for.
Which is clarity.
Simple clarity. He looked at everything, the normal sciences, even weird stuff like astrology and alchemy, and just found them all lacking. They weren't certain.
Which brings us to mathematics. He loved math. He saw its certainty, its distinctness.
But it drove him crazy. He couldn't understand why this perfectly certain science was only being used for what he called simple jobs, measuring a field, some basic mechanics.
He thought it should be the foundation for that higher structure of knowledge he was dreaming about.
It was like having this incredible, powerful engine and just letting it sit in the garage. That frustration is really what pushes him towards his next radical move.
Okay, so that takes us to the big moment. Winter 1619, Germany.
He's stuck in a room, heated by a stove. The 30 Years' War is raging outside, so there's chaos everywhere. And he decides the only answer is to rebuild all of human knowledge by himself.
It sounds kind of crazy when you put it like that.
Well, he has a great analogy. He said it was like a city that's been built randomly over centuries, just a jumble of crooked streets. Isn't it better to just tear it all down and have a single architect design it cleanly from the start?
So this wasn't just spring cleaning. This was total demolition.
Total demolition of every opinion he'd ever accepted without checking it himself.
Now, it's important to distinguish his kind of doubt, right? He wasn't just a pessimist saying, we can't know anything.
Exactly. That's the key difference. The ancient skeptics, the Pyrrhonists, they used doubt to just end up in a state of suspension. It was negative. Descartes' doubt was a tool, an active, positive method for finding certainty.
And his rule was to reject anything that had even the slightest possibility of being doubted.
Even the tiniest crack in the foundation.
Yeah,
He pushed it to the absolute limit.
he's saying, what if my senses are tricking me? What if my whole life is just a dream, created by some malicious demon?
That's the experiment. But then In that act of trying to doubt absolutely everything, he finds the one thing he can't doubt.
The act of doubting itself.
You got it. You can doubt what you see, what you hear, but you cannot possibly doubt that you are the one doing the doubting.
And that's the moment. Cogito ergo sum.
I think, therefore I am. The bedrock. The single, certain point in a universe of doubt. Modern philosophy, you could argue, begins right there.
So the self, the I, is now the first and only undeniable truth.
And the nature of that I is revolutionary.
Yeah.
He says it's a thinking substance. It doesn't need a body. It doesn't need physical space to exist.
He even says the mind, the soul, is easier to know than the body.
And that it would still be itself even if the body was gone. This is a radical move. It places the self before anything else. Even in his argument, before God.
That's a huge shift. So he has this one tiny point of certainty, the thinking self. How on earth does he build a whole system of science out of that?
That's where the discourse comes in. He argues that all the complicated rules of old school logic are, well, useless for actually discovering new things.
They're good for winning arguments, maybe.
Exactly. Great for debating, terrible for discovery. So he proposes replacing them with just 4 simple rules.
Okay, let's walk through them. This is basically the operating manual for his whole system. What's rule number 1?
Rule 1 is all about clarity and evidence, basically. Never accept anything as true unless you clearly and distinctly see that it is true. Avoid all prejudice, all haste.
It's the ultimate BS filter.
You could call it that, yeah.
Okay, so once you have a big, complicated problem, what's next?
That's rule 2, analysis. You divide every single difficulty into as many small parts as you possibly can. You break it down until you're left with simple, tiny truths that you can then check with rule 1.
And then comes the genius part, right? The reconstruction. Rule 3.
Yes, rule 3, synthesis and order. You start with the simplest things, the little truths you just found, and you slowly, step by step, build your way up to the most complex knowledge.
And he says you have to assume an order, even if there isn't an obvious one.
Yes, you have to be disciplined. You can't jump ahead. It's a ladder, and you have to climb every single rung.
So analysis is taking the machine apart. Synthesis is putting it back together in the right order.
Perfectly put. And then the final rule is the quality check.
Rule 4.
Enumeration and review. You make complete, exhaustive reviews of the whole process to make sure absolutely nothing was missed. It's a final guarantee of certainty.
He thought this could work for anything, because all knowledge was just a long chain. If you started at the right place and didn't miss a link, you could get anywhere.
And he even invented a tool for it, which he called universal mathematics. This is a huge deal that sometimes gets overlooked.
Right, it's not just about numbers.
No, not at all. It was his idea of using the abstract logic of algebra, with its simple signs and variables, to analyze all kinds of relationships, not just quantities. He wanted to turn philosophy into something as certain as geometry.
That is an incredibly powerful idea. But to do all this, you have to live in a state of doubt for a long, long time. I mean, how do you even decide to, walk across the street?
That's the exact problem he ran into.
Yeah.
And is why he created his temporary moral code.
A practical guide for living while you're intellectually homeless.
That's a great way to put it. He needed a few rules for action so he wouldn't be paralyzed by indecision in his judgments.
And the most famous of those rules is very stoic, isn't it?
Oh, profoundly. So the third one. Try to conquer yourself rather than fortune, and change your desires rather than the order of the world.
Basically, the only thing you have absolute control over is your own mind.
That's the core of it. Contentment comes from realizing what you can't control and focusing on what you can.
And he applied the same kind of methodical breakdown to the human being itself. He's famous for separating the mind from the body.
Right. His mind-body dualism. You have the immaterial thinking substance, the soul or mind, and the extended material substance, the body.
But they're connected somehow.
Yes, and he had a very specific idea about where. He said they're united in the pineal gland, of all places. Right in the center of the brain.
He saw the body as a very sophisticated machine.
A machine made by God, yes. He thought the organs, the muscles, the nerves, they could all move on their own like clockwork, even without the soul telling them what to do.
And this mechanical view led to a really interesting disagreement he had about the heart. He knew William Harvey had discovered blood circulation.
He praises Harvey for it, yes. But he completely disagreed on why the blood moves.
This is fascinating. So Harvey said the heart is a pump, a muscle.
And Descartes said, no, you've got it wrong. The heart isn't a pump, it's a furnace.
A furnace?
Yeah. His theory was that when blood enters the heart, it meets this incredible, intense heat, and it instantly expands and swells. Like a drop of water on a hot iron.
And that sudden expansion is what forces the blood out into the arteries.
Exactly. It's a purely mechanical, heat-driven explosion, not a muscular contraction. It's a brilliant, if wrong, piece of mechanical reasoning.
Okay, so if the human body is a machine, and you thought animals were basically just complex machines too, how do you tell a real person from a very clever robot or an animal?
He came up with two tests for that. Two things, he said, that no machine or animal could ever do.
What's the first one?
Language. A machine or animal might be able to mimic sounds or words, but they can't arrange words in new ways to respond meaningfully to all kinds of different situations. They can't really converse.
And a second test?
It's what he calls universal reason. An animal might be amazing at one specific task, a spider weaving a perfect web, for instance.
Better than a human could.
Right. But it fails completely when you put it in a new situation. Its actions are just dictated by its biology, by the arrangement of its organs. It lacks that flexible general intelligence that allows humans to adapt. So, he concluded, animals are not rational.
That certainty is amazing, but it also got him into trouble, or at least he was afraid it would. He held back one of his biggest books, The World.
Yes, that was pure fear. He heard that Galileo had been condemned in 1633 for saying the Earth moves.
And Descartes' physics relied on the same idea.
Absolutely. So he got scared. He decided to suppress the whole work. He even said, if the Earth doesn't move, then my entire philosophy is false. So it's a huge deal for him.
But when he finally did publish, what was the ultimate goal? What was all this mastery over nature for?
It was incredibly ambitious. He said his principles would lead to knowledge that was very useful for life, and that we could become masters and possessors of nature.
And not just for inventing clever gadgets.
No, this was about understanding the fundamental forces of the world, fire, air, water, as clearly as a craftsman understands their tools.
And the number one application for all this knowledge.
It was medicine, the preservation of health. He called it the first good and the foundation of all other goods of life.
He really believed that this method, if applied correctly, could free us from disease.
From countless diseases, and he even suggested maybe from the weaknesses of old age itself. That's how powerful he thought this was.
And to get this revolutionary idea out to as many people as possible, he made another radical choice. He published the discourse in French.
Not Latin, which was the language of all scholarship. That was a huge statement.
Why did he do it?
He said he wanted to be judged by people who use their natural, pure reason, regular, intelligent people, not by academics who just blindly follow the authority of old books. He was bypassing the establishment.
So if you had to boil it all down, what's the big takeaway from Descartes?
What he gave us was this powerful shortcut, saying, look, you don't need to read 1,000 ancient texts that all disagree with each other. If you're just brave enough to doubt what you've been told, and then you apply this simple 4-step method of clarity, analysis, and synthesis, you can find truths that are as solid as a mathematical proof.
Which brings us to a really interesting final thought, one that kind of echoes his biggest ambition. Descartes truly believed that his method could eventually give us control over the infirmities of old age. So if we apply that same radical doubt, that same simple, certain method to the massive problems we face today, what boundaries, maybe even biological ones, can we still break just by being brave enough to question everything we think we know?
It's a powerful question.
It certainly is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the quest for Cartesian certainty.